Previously on X-Men.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the world's most mutated podcast. That's right. It's Uncanny Treks covers X-Men 97. It's the nostalgia show. I'm Bob in Cascadia. That's Matt in the Southland. Matt, how are you doing this evening?
Doing really well, Bob. To get prepared for this podcast, I had to get all my stuff together, and I put my headphones on. I said, I want to watch the intro to 97 again, because you had talked about it. So we're going to talk about it a lot in this podcast.
Yeah, because it's different for the two different episodes.
Exactly. And so I turn it on YouTube, and I have my earphones on, my earbuds on, and I didn't realize I didn't have my phone to text you to say, hey, I'm ready for the podcast. And I start running around the house with the X-Men music in my ears. And it felt like I was back in fourth grade fighting invisible people trying to get around the house on a mission. Of course, then I felt completely embarrassed because my phone was directly behind me in the same room I podcast in. I just didn't look, so I was running around the house to the X-Men theme almost at 40, looking for something that was right in front of my face.
Nice. Yeah, way to get back to 1994 for 1997.
Extremely excited about X-Men 97 now after these first two episodes. I'm thinking this is a winner, Bob.
I think both of us, but more me, talked a lot of crap on the preview episode, and I stand by most of it, especially the former showrunner. His opinions on Emma Frost, bad, real bad. But that said, man, this was so good. I have to eat a lot of crow. This was very good.
It's okay, Bob. See, if you always go in positive, when it's not good, you look good. But if you always go in negative, and it turns out good, then you have to eat crow.
But see, Matt, you're more concerned about your public perception. I'm more concerned about my own satisfaction. And so going in negative, I think made me enjoy it more.
This sounds like a dichotomy on the X-Men, Bob, here.
You're Cyclops and I'm Wolverine. I know that's painful for both of us.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, that hurts. But I guess that's
It
how
does.
we turned out. All right.
It does. Before we turn into what's mostly just going to be a gushing podcast, I did want to say I was trying to watch this on Wednesday afternoon. Was Disney Plus very, very laggy for you?
Yes, on at least 10 different occasions it had to buffer for a few seconds, and it was very annoying because I was so into the show. And it did bother me a little bit. It did take away just a tiny bit from the excitement of the show. Disney, get your stuff figured out. If you have a big debut of a show like this, you're gonna have so many people watching it. I don't know. Add some extra bandwidth. You're Disney, okay?
House of Mouse can swing it.
Yeah.
Although I take that to at least be a positive sign. I mean, since streaming is so opaque, Matt, we don't get ratings like we do with real television. So the only ratings we have is, oh man, did the app give me a really hard time watching this? Yeah. Yes. Maybe it's very successful.
Yeah. Or you have the 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, Bob.
Yeah.
Which I don't think is going to stay. But for right now, it's 100%. And I'm not saying this is going to be perfect. There's no way. We're going to have some weak episodes. Just like our coverage for Strange New Worlds. We've got strengths, we've got weaknesses.
Although with Strange New World, they're weak, but there isn't a Strange New Worlds episode that I can remember that I actively think is bad.
There's not a single Strange New Worlds episode I wouldn't rewatch.
There's one I might get up and do a little housework, but there's not one that I dislike, no.
Thanks for that clarification, Bob. We'll have to have a list of episodes that Bob can do housework to, and Bob has to actually sit and watch.
That's an important distinction, man. That's an important distinction. All right, Matt. Did you mist up a little? Did you cry a little during the show?
Do you mean over the lagging, or do you mean just the actual show
general.
itself? Oh, in general.
Just in general.
So, Bob, yeah, I did get a little nostalgic, and I did tear up a little bit. Some of this things. This feels like we're back there. It really does. This is the sticking the nostalgia in the arm, and it feels right.
Yeah, it is incredible that, and I saw other people make observations to this effect. We've had the Marvel Cinematic Universe for basically 20 years, right?
Right.
Pretty close to, I think. And this is so much better than anything the MCU has ever done. No, it's not even close.
Yeah, they literally stuck to the formula, but just made it more modern.
And to me, it's a testament to the fact that live action superheroes, even though I've watched a lot of them, just don't really work. Animation and comics are the natural twins, right?
You're going from still image to moving image to actual living human beings moving. So it's a whole different ball. It's a whole different thing. There's so much more you can do in animation too, and it looks good. And,
And
if it doesn't look good, you can then change it. Whereas with live action, you got to refilm, you got to redo all this other stuff. You have to actually come up with the effects. It's a lot more difficult.
You're limited by CGI. You're limited by our inherent skepticism of live action more so than our skepticism of animation or hand drawings.
So make sure you stay tuned towards the end of this episode because we are going to discuss some other revivals that have happened in the last 10, 20 years and talk about where they fall, where X-Men 97 falls within those TV shows.
We'll probably come back to that conversation too at the end of this season. But yeah, we'll definitely start it for now. And don't worry, I did manage to find a few negative comments. Not as many as I would have liked, but a few. In some sense, I'm glad people were positive and appreciated the show. But in another sense, it was I wanted content for us to complain about.
Right. Well, I also found a very very stupid meme this morning that I added, so hopefully we'll have more to talk about. All right.
I'm looking forward to that.
All right, Bob, so let's break into this.
So the first episode's To Me, My X-Men. Matt, did you have any thoughts on the updated opening credits?
About the opening credits, I liked the music. I'm really bad about going on YouTube sometimes and listening to covers of some music. That sounds really lame. But X-Men the Animated Series had some really good covers on YouTube where people doing it in a metal style. So I've heard those versions, and I like those. So this, to me, was not that big of a deal. It was a slight shift. I don't know the music terminology to explain it, but it's not that different to me. I enjoyed it.
I thought the music was fine, and there was an amusing thing floating around that one of Kevin Feige's conditions for producing the show was they had to get the rights to the song. But I didn't love the animation in the opening credits. I wasn't a fan of it. I think I am getting used to it more, but just first seeing it, I was, this doesn't seem right. I think it was maybe just that it's so close to the original style, but also still so different, if that makes sense.
Oh, boo, Bob. I disagree with you on this.
Yeah.
I
don't know. Maybe,
I think they went
maybe
through,
I'll feel better about it as we go along.
I think they went through a labor of love with this because they flat out there are people comparing them side by side, and it's amazing how, like, they tried to do the exact same setup and how they managed to fit in, like, Morph and Bishop and the other characters somewhat seamlessly, but if you noticed, everything was sped up just a little bit so they can keep everyone in. And then the changes they made were positive.
Putting Morph and Bishop in was great. I really liked that. Replacing Xavier with Magneto in the second one is hilarious.
Was hilarious. Yes.
I'm not complaining about that. I'm just complaining about the actual animation, if that makes sense.
Also, is this the first time you've been exposed to the animation style of the show? Like, have you been under a cave or something, Bob? Did you watch the trailer?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, that explains it then. Yeah, it is a little different. It's a little different.
I don't watch much animation.
Bob doesn't watch much animation, but look at how much buddy podcast we've done on animated shows. Visit our Patreon, X-Men 92 versus Young Justice. We don't watch a lot of animation.
I don't watch anything that's not a licensed property.
You don't watch anime or animation. I get what you're saying. You watch superhero animation.
Yeah, and Star Trek and Star Wars. And Planet of the Apes animation.
Jesus. Okay, you don't watch animation, Bob. Yeah, that's right.
No, I'm a completionist for a franchise, man.
You call it what you want.
I don't have a very wide palette as far as animation styles go.
That's acceptable. I like that. Yes, you don't have a wide palette for which to choose.
I would be clear, and this is probably the last negative thing I'll say about it, is I don't have good language to say what feels slightly off to me about the animation, especially in the opening credits, but it does feel slightly off. And I think it's probably just psychologically, oh, and obviously they had to do this, but I think it's just psychologically, oh, it's close to the original, but it's not the original, and that's a strange experience.
And I'm sure there's a name for that. I don't know what you would call it. It's got to be nostalgia something.
So far in this episode, you've used getting nostalgic as a synonym for crying, and getting nostalgic as a synonym for being off-put by an animation style.
I have a very limited vocabulary, but I think I'm right though.
You're layering complexity on the word nostalgia. It feels very French to me. I like it.
You're welcome.
One last, or two last comments about the opening credits. One, it was pretty funny that Jean Grey got promoted in order. She's one of the last ones in the original, and I think she's number 2 in the order that they gave us in the first episode.
Yeah, she's number 2 in the roll call. Instead of where she or number 3 in the second episode, whereas in the previous thing she was at the very end. Yeah. Did you? And the other thing I was going to ask you, Bob, too, about Jean Grey, were you glad they added her to the running part at the end? She was not in the original.
I got to admit, I missed that. I'm glad you picked up on it. On the running part, I was paying attention to the Brotherhood lineup.
Oh, me too.
So it's Juggernaut, Emma Frost, Lady Shiva, Pyro, Mystique, Tooth, and Avalanche. So that's with I think the exception of Lady Shiva and Avalanche. That's a very Pride of the X-Men lineup.
Oh yeah, for sure. And we don't have the Green Dude and Warpath from the original X-Men 92 intro.
The Green Dude, who was just a guy the animators created to make an even number, but people retconned as being the Hulk villain, the leader. Warpath was a antagonistic hero in the 80s and had one issue where he came after the X-Men, but by even the time that X-Men 92 came out, he was a well-established hero and member of X-Force.
Right, yeah, that's all I always remember him as. Another action figure where he would punch the crap out of somebody.
That was a good action figure. Yeah. Speaking of members of X-Force, our new character, although not in the opening credits, was Sunspot, and they kept Sunspot being rich, which is an important part of his character, and I was very glad of it.
Does he show off his wealth in the comics as much as he does in this episode? Because that's almost part of his character big time.
Yes.
It's like, he's the rich, douchey kid.
When Al Ewing writes Sunspot, usually Sunspot's solution to any problem is he buys out the enemy. That's like usually how he wins. He's great.
I mean, he's showing off to Jubilee about he has his own jet. And, dude, so 90s. Got my own jet. I just fly us out. Okay. Does your jet go in space like the X-Men's? Does it have Shi'ar technology like the X-Men's? Yeah. Yeah, I don't think so, Sunspot.
Eventually, if for our listeners who want to check out our other podcasts, where we also are just wrapping up our coverage of the Hickman Fantastic Four run in the comics. And Matt, you remember AIM Island?
Oh, I do remember AIM Island.
If we ever cover the Hickman Avengers run, which granted, if we do it, that's months away, we might cover a side run that Al Ewing wrote in which Sunspot buys out AIM and just becomes the leader of AIM and is ruling AIM Island. It's a good little series.
Man, Sunspot's come a long way from what I remember him as. He just was a dude in a really cool looking outfit that shot beams out of his hands.
I think that's what we thought he did, but that was not really what he did.
We were always attracted more to Sunfire because he was a original member of the Claremont run, the Claremont group in Second Genesis.
And I think the name and I think the trading card image of Sunspot made it seem he's an energy projection guy.
Yes.
But he's not. That's not his main thing. His thing is he goes into this Hulk-like form from the solar energy that you see in this episode.
And that's why his skin turns that darker color.
That's his solar energy form. And he's not full Hulk, but it makes him a lot stronger.
Okay. Yeah, I just remember I had the action figure of him, and then we had the cards from, I think they were from Fleer, I think was the name of the brand.
Yeah.
But those did portray him as, okay, he's like Sunfire.
That's what we thought. What we thought. And we only had a couple X-Force comic. I think they were mine, and that was not... We read a lot more of the main X-Men series when we were kids. We only read a couple X-Force comics, as I recall.
Yeah, that's true. Most of them, too, were crossover events, in my case, at least.
Yeah. All right, Matt. So to keep going on toys and tie-in related topics, did you have any thoughts on the Friends of Humanity goons getting Mega Men guns?
Yeah, the toy actually spoiled this for me because they have an action figure of the Executioner that they released with the newest wave of action figures for the series. and he had this thing that you could put on his hand, and I'm like, what is that? And it does. It looks exactly like a Mega Man gun. It even lights up on the side like a Mega Man gun. Is Mega Man in continuity with X-Men? Are we going to find out that Mega Man is... I don't know. I don't remember if Mega Man's from another planet or something. I'm pretty sure he is. But
Isn't he a robot?
yeah, he's... I don't know. I don't know, honest to God. I played the games,
I watched,
but I never really got into the lore of it. He just shot things.
I watched an episode here or there of the anime, and I think he was a robot, but I could be wrong. But it is neat that at first I was, they're just doing a Mega Man thing, and then it's, no, they're harvesting Sentinel technology, which is actually a very cool idea.
It is really cool. They're using the weapons from the Sentinels. Did you like the Sentinel hand opening up to blow apart Cyclops? Like I didn't think that was going to be that big of a deal, and then once the laser actually came out, it was gigantic. Oh, yeah, I think it can destroy stuff inside.
That was great. I really did like the entrances they gave, especially Storm and Bishop. The wind slowly picking up, and then the Sentinel saying Omega level mutant detected. That was a really great entrance for Storm. Bishop sliding in was a neat moment too, I thought.
They were setting up a lot of suspense for seeing these characters in action again, do X-Men stuff. so I was just waiting. I know Storm's coming. They said they're getting cold. So that she's on her way. Okay.
Well, it is interesting because it really does. I mean, it's subtle, but it really does pick up on the fact that Storm and Jean are the two strongest members of this lineup.
Right, which was not always the case in the original series.
Especially with Jean when she wasn't the Phoenix. But with Storm, I think the original series knew that, but like you're saying, it didn't always emphasize that.
Right. How long did it take us to get a Rogue action figure? And when it did come out, it was a collector's item. You had to spend like $50 for a figure. Back then, it was crazy.
Yeah. And there were Storm action figures, but they weren't the most well designed.
Oh, they were awful. Yeah. And Jean Grey, I don't even think there was a decent Jean Grey figure. They had a Phoenix action figure.
Oh yeah, the Phoenix action figure ruled. I had that one.
But then was there ever a Jean Grey figure?
I mean, how would you make the bodysuit into a good figure? I don't know.
I don't know either. I know they did some mutant armor figures with her, so that's probably how they got around the whole suit design. But you're never going to get just a basic Jean Grey figure back then.
Well, Matt, did you like the callback with Cyclops' knot gag?
I mean, it was a funny callback to Night of Sentinels, which this whole episode was sort of a retread of that, which I thought was clever, honestly. And his delivery of the knot was quick enough that it didn't make it lame. Because if you remember in the original episode, it's just too long. He's more like knot.
Yeah. It was actually executed, and I mean, this is one of many things, but it was actually executed a lot better than the cartoon, right?
which is weird to be talking about. But yes, I mean, it was. It sounded better. Coming from the 90s, too, when that was a popular comeback for stupid stuff. I mean...
Yeah. That was something every kid said to each other in the 90s, and if you were a bad kid, you said to your parents.
Yeah. And then they usually slapped you.
Yeah. As well they should have. All right. So... Cyclops, we see his powers really fully on display in this opening scene and in later scenes, which we'll get to. He and the Sentinel really blow out the warehouse, and we see a Daily Bugle floating by in the wind and force from the explosion. And Matt, did you notice on that Daily Bugle that it's advertising a fashion show, which maybe is by Jumbo Carnation? Nothing says that, but one might assume it's by Jumbo Carnation, the mutant fashion designer. And we have the X-Men dust on the cover.
Yeah, this was actually in the trailer, at the beginning of the trailer, and I remember when it dropped, and everybody was all up in arms because it looked like Banshee was on the cover of the fashion show.
Yeah. Well,
I'm just going to assume it's an outfit inspired by Banshee.
Well, I didn't catch that on the screen. I just caught dust.
Mm-hmm.
But looking at a still of the image somebody posted, yeah, I think that is Banshee. I'm going to go with that.
Okay. I just don't know if Banshee would be in the fashion show, Bob. That just seems... Is that out of character for him? You've read more Banshee than I have.
Well... I mean, the thing about Banshee is that he's literally been everything. He's been a spy, he's been a criminal, he's been a cop, he's been a country music singer. And so you can see he's a man who takes on many personas.
We know Jumbo Carnation from Grant Morrison's run.
And they've used them a fair amount in the Krakoa era. Not a whole lot, but a fair amount in the Krakoa era. We see Dust and we see Banshee on the cover. We see, I guess, two other mutants that I didn't recognize, and I didn't see anybody say who they were, but maybe somebody spotted that. And then the other two details that were interesting, the top lines of the Daily Bugle cover, one mentioned the Hellfire Gala, and then one asked if Spider-Man is a mutant.
Wow. The Hellfire Gala thing's awesome, because I would love to see that. I don't know how they would do it, but I want to see it on display in this show. That would be awesome. The Spider-Man as a mutant thing, that could be an interesting tie-in plot if they ever wanted to bring in Spider-Man, what would it be, 94? Yeah, that would be awesome. I will say this too, Bob. Recently, we got downloadable content for the Spider-Man 2 video game, and they happen to have Miles Morales and Peter Parker in their Hellfire Gala attire, which
interesting.
is actually pretty fire, if I do say so myself.
I do have to say, I enjoy the Hellfire Gala as an event, and I enjoy that everybody enjoys it, but I usually don't care for the costumes, I have to say. I'm not sure if that's just me, a straight guy, just doesn't have taste for fashion.
I just like the designs on some of them, that's about it. It just depends. Some of it's really, really stupid looking, and some of it I'm like, that could actually work pretty well, and I could see them actually using that in their series or as their regular outfit.
Yeah, although in a certain sense, it's an interesting aesthetic, because I don't know how to describe what they're going for, because like with animation, I don't really have an aesthetic vocabulary for fashion. But it doesn't seem they're trying to do new costumes per se, right? It seems they're trying to make some sort of deconstructed statement about their costume for high dress.
It's formal superhero wear. It's cool. It's like the formal outfits on Star Trek. The dress uniforms.
They are like dress uniforms, but they're much more personalized and conceptual, whereas the dress uniforms are just the dress uniforms.
Yeah. But let's talk a little more about fashion, Bob, because that's what the show's all about, I'll be honest.
Yeah. So, Matt, the two sensations sweeping the internet, one is Magneto, which we'll get to in the second episode, but the other is Gambit's cutoff T-shirt. What'd you think?
Yeah, Bob, man's wearing a pink cutoff tee that just has the word rock on it. Two guitars just slamming lightning.
It might have had roll on the bottom, but that's gone.
Yeah, he done cut that off. It's in the trash. Or he's using it to tie back that ponytail. That fabric is his ponytail holder.
He's frying some beignets. It's a look, man. It's a look. It made many female and many gay fans of the show happy, so I'm happy for them. Yeah. And we also have Rogue's pink dress, which I really liked.
Yeah, I was good with it.
Yeah, it was very 90s, but it was very more fashionable than some 90s things are. And then speaking of a lack of fashion, Jean Grey is pregnant in a yoga outfit, and it's perfect for the time. It's absolutely perfect 90s mom wear,
exactly.
But my God, does it look terrible?
Yes, it's like my mom was pregnant and looked like that.
So to keep going, when Jubilee's talking about other mutant powers, she mentions a set of powers that belong to gold balls, aka egg, which is the power to just produce gold balls, which we later find out are eggs that can be fertilized in order to recreate X-Men.
Yeah, which is extremely important to the Krakoan era in the comics.
It is. So I doubt it, but maybe we'll see gold balls, aka egg, later in the run of the show.
I think I'm a good kitty to have season 3 be all about Krakoa.
That would be funny. And then we have Wolverine in the danger room intimidating Sunspot and making a Star Trek reference, which, I don't know, should Wolverine be making Star Trek references?
I mean, in 1997, Voyager was on, right?
Yeah, DS9 and Voyager.
Yeah, I mean, that was a big time for Star Trek. So, I mean, it's okay. It's all right.
Yeah. Well, and we saw, I guess, in episode 2, Wolverine does like to watch TV.
Maybe Wolverine would actually listen to our previous episodes on this podcast about Star Trek, Bob, if he were listening now.
Wolverine can be a fanboy for us.
When he wants some X-Men, he wants some Star Trek nostalgia, he pops onto Uncanny Treks.
Indeed, and he can give us $5 of Xavier money a month in order to listen to our coverage of X-Men 92 and Young Justice.
In fact, he might want to be our top tier, Bob. He might want to be Weapon X. Give us $50 a month.
Well, he looks at that. I mean, it's for me. It has my name.
Come on, Wolverine. You're out there.
So, Matt, we have Dr. Val Cooper show up, and she didn't appear in the original animated series, right?
No, but my understanding, she played a heavy role in X Factor in the mid-90s, right?
Yeah, she's the government liaison for X Factor, and then in subsequent comics, she's been government liaison for the X-Men. I think sometimes she's a supporting character and an ally. Sometimes she's more played as an antagonist. If I remember right, the run right before Hickman's, which was not a popular run, I didn't hate it, but many people did. I think she's more of an antagonist in that run, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I don't remember much about her, honestly, but she was there. And it looks like they pulled a character that actually had some significance in the comics to add to the show.
All right. So when Jean Grey persuades Wolverine to go along with Wolverine, would you describe that as just pulling a sexual whammy, or did it seem to be more a telepathic whammy?
Oh, it was totally sexual, Bob. It caught me off guard at first when I watched. As wow, Wolverine just listens to Jean. So I'm thinking he still has something on her. Maybe he thinks he's really the father.
Another detail about Wolverine that was interesting in this episode, and this is obvious, but I never really caught on to it, is that in the animated series, Morph basically does the same role or has the same function for Wolverine that Nightcrawler does in the comic, which is to say a friend, confidant, a guy who more understands him. But there's already some sexual tension between Wolverine and Nightcrawler. There's a very famous cover from the Greg Rucka run of Wolverine with Nightcrawler and Wolverine that's a lot of sexual tension, let's say. But I would say Morph has even more sexual tension with Wolverine. You get the feeling that Morph may have subbed in as Jean for Wolverine.
Yeah,
before.
Morph has no issue just turning into any female Jean, anybody that's from your past. Can you imagine having that power to people? Just show up as your ex-wife or something. That is an extremely insane power set that Morph has.
Since we're on Morph's power set, there was some consternation online about them being too powerful, which our theory when we covered Morph's return in the 90s X-Men series, which I don't think we've released that episode yet. We will soon. But my theory is that Morph just gets the physical attributes. So they can use Blob's squishiness because that's part of Blob's physical form, or they can fly when they're Archangel because that's part of Archangel's physical form, but they don't necessarily get Colossus's invulnerability. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, but at the same time, it makes you wonder. Shapeshifting is so much like Odo's. Can form things like that shouldn't be part of anatomy. The claws, for instance. And I'm assuming his claws are not going to be made out of adamantium, so if you go and slice them, it's actually whatever Morph's skin is made of. Is that the idea?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Remember when they tried to kill off Morph in the original series? And now we're still talking about him in 2004.
He's actually a member of the team, as opposed to when they don't show up in the opening credits in the pilot of the first X-Men, and you're just, wonder which of these characters will die. Bet it's the one who's not in the credits. To keep moving, we also have the interesting fact that the mutants are in right now. There's a vogue or a fad or a trend for mutants, as demonstrated by the Hellfire Gala headline, things like that. And that is really interestingly reminiscent of Grant Morrison's run, right? And I think it's also interesting because it brings up this dilemma that I think both queer and trans politics have to deal with. On the one hand, we're in an era where there's backlash, but in a lot of ways, queer and trans people and queer and trans cultural forms are pretty popular. But then on the other hand, you have the problem of is that actually acceptance, or is it just a passing fad? And might you be in a worse spot after the fad or the trend passes? So I think that's an interesting political dilemma that underlies this development of the mutants as the new in thing, or the new it thing.
I recently reread Morrison's run, and yes, I see a lot of that. And this pulled directly from Morrison's run. I love it. It's something that you do see a lot of the political piece in it. And also with the Friends of Humanity, you see the people who were against the X-Men who show up to try to take down the mansion, burn it down and stuff. That's the Friends of Humanity. They haven't gone anywhere. But the whole scale, you can see that in the actual world building they're doing here. Where you're saying, okay, so there's this group of people that dislike mutants. It's not the entire population. And that doesn't make them woke. It makes the Friends of Humanity the bad guys. And everyone else is just doing the right thing. That's what they're trying to bring apart here.
You do get the sense that in the same way that the fact that, and again, there's a lot of ways to go for full social acceptance. There's still not non-discrimination protections in most states for queer and trans people,
right,
as I understand it. We're a long way to go before we're at anything approaching an acceptable level of civil rights. But the fact that queer and trans people have a lot of positive visibility in the culture, in some sense, also conditions these crazy bigots to rise up in number, right? Like you're saying, they're definitely just a loud minority, but it does allow them to feel aggrieved and assaulted. Your friends of humanity become your equivalent of your conservatives freaking out on the internet over that high school kids might be queer or trans, or freaking out over that, oh my God, Bud Light has a Pride campaign, although Bud Light's had a Pride campaign since at least the 90s, if not longer. It is interesting that that's another flip side of when you have cultural acceptance, but not necessarily full social rights or full political acceptance. It creates a condition for this backlash politics of your Jordan Petersons and your Ben Shapiros or your Friends of Humanity, right?
Yeah, it's insane. And also, guys, bathrooms. Stop worrying about bathrooms.
Yeah. I think we're
past it. Let's never go back to it. No one cared. I have no doubt that nothing has ever gone down between people, trans people, and non-trans people in a bathroom. Ever. I don't think it's ever happened. I don't think there's a story out there.
And we got a long way to go before queer and trans people have full social and civil rights. But that said, I do think I hope this remains the case. We are at a place where it's the bigots on the right who look like the freaks and who look like the weirdos and who looks like the ones who are obsessing over nothing, not just normal people trying to live their lives as themselves, right?
Right.
So I think that's maybe a positive point.
All right, Bob. Let's move on to something less serious. Yeah. Let's move on to something a little less serious and a little less. Go right ahead, Bob.
Yeah, so we have Jean having a cerebrovision, and she sees a master mold that's very skeletal, and I really liked that skeletal design of master mold. I thought it was a neat version of the character.
And I'll say this, Bob. Somebody brought up the point that master mold was coming back last episode in our preview episode. It was me. That's right. It's here. Although it was it was the wrong episode.
Do you think that Master Mold is going to come back later this season? I would tend to say yes.
Think so. No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I doubt it.
Okay, you think we're Master Molded out?
I think we're still going to have the Sentinel technology with the Friends of Humanity, but I think Master Mold and the Sentinels piece is done. It was just a way to get back to it was a way to have the first episode of X-Men 92 fit in very well with X-Men 97 because they're both
Sentinels. Well, and also a little bit of a callback to the season finale of season 1 of X-Men 92.
Right, that whole piece too, yeah, and adding that in.
I did look away from the screen for a minute when Morph transformed into Archangel. So at first did Archangel just randomly show up?
That's the same thing I thought, Bob. I thought the exact same thing. I didn't even look away from the screen. He just swoops in. And you're like, did Archangel join the team? Can I just miss the whole thing? Are they bringing out the reserves and they just didn't mention it? This is part of the fun? I don't know. No, it was Morph.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the scene we're talking about here is the scene where the X-Men, the Blackbird gets blasted, and so they're hurtling towards the Earth, so they all have to improvise to save each other. And man, they're really working overtime. We had already seen this in the first fight, but they're really working overtime on pushing that Cyclops' optic blast or force beams. We literally see him use them to slow his descent to the Earth.
Yeah, they're making it very clear. And I don't know if you remember this, Bob. When we first started the X-Men 92 versus Young Justice podcast, you did not care if Cyclops blasts were more laser than concussion. Do you remember that?
I remember it, and I still don't care.
House of Mouse
get upset.
Mickey Mouse wants you to know that they aren't lasers that could be used to slow your descent as you jump from a plane, which I think is pretty cool.
I know that Disney wants me to know, and I still don't care, Matt. I still don't care.
Mickey Mouse is going to slap you, Bob, if you don't accept that they're concussion blasts.
So, Matt, what was cooler, Rogue using a Sentinel head as a weapon, or Beast jumping in one and replacing its heart and controlling it?
Okay, I really liked the Beast replacing the heart of the Headless Sentinel because there had to have been manual controls installed at some point, just in case you had to take over the Sentinel. And I thought it was cool he was able to go in and do it. Remember that old Sentinel toy, Bob, that had the chest
I
that
do
would pop
remember.
off?
Yes.
Now,
Yeah.
yeah, there's a reason to put it in there. You
Yeah,
can put
yeah.
your X-Men in there now, and they're like, oh, he was in control of the Sentinel the whole time. I'm gonna go recreate that after this podcast, Bob. No,
Now, if they could just design a Sentinel like that had legs and arms that could move.
that's the truth. Not those where you pop it in the kneecaps and its feet fly off. That was weird.
I did enjoy that, though.
It was cool for a couple of times.
Other things from the fight, we see Gambit and Bishop working closely together, which is interesting given their previous history in both the comics and the cartoon. And then we see an amazing scene, which I gather was in the trailer, where Gambit charges up Wolverine's claws. That was great.
Yeah, it was, and it reminded me of the double team moves you could do in Ultimate Alliance, the video game. If you had Gambit and Wolverine, you could do something similar to this, but I'm not going to say it. This was way cooler looking than anything on that game.
Now, Matt, another podcast might really focus on the return of Magneto, but instead of the return of Magneto, I just want to focus on the return of his mullet.
Bob, is it a mullet, though?
It's pretty business in the front, and it is definitely party in the back.
It looks like he just hasn't cut it in a while. He's letting it go wild, but it doesn't seem like it's cut any different lengths. I don't know, but it is. I will say that look is better than the braids he had in Age of Apocalypse.
Who was your favorite character in this first episode, To Me, My X-Men, Matt?
Oh my God, Bob, it's got to be Cyclops because he hasn't skipped a beat. Throw in Gambit and Wolverine under the bus. He has a problem with everybody.
He does.
Including
his wife.
Yeah, his power set is his pregnant wife. And his costume, Bob, still the best costume. Still the best Cyclops costume.
I don't know about all that. But,
See, you disagree with that, fine. But I'm telling you, out of all the Cyclops costumes I've seen, that's the best one. Even with the pouches, I love it. I take that costume over any other one.
For my character of the week, I'll go with pregnant Jean Grey. There's something deeply terrifying about her being both pregnant and in Cerebro. I actually really dig it. It's a very interesting and cool look. So, yeah, great to see the show actually making Jean a character, which is something X-Men 92 never got around to in 5 years.
Yeah, and, okay, in Cerebro here, Bob, I felt they took a lot of the Cerebro stuff from the movies and put it into this.
One other thing about the first episode. So we were somewhat complaining on the preview episode that we already knew who said To Me, My X-Men. But did you catch that they reused it at the end of the episode with Magneto saying it in a different sentence? I thought that was actually pretty clever.
Different sentence, different tone. Yeah, it was very
Yeah.
It was awesome.
All right, so episode 2, Mutant Liberation begins. We already talked about Magneto replacing Xavier in the intro. Matt, the first thing that really stood out to me about this episode was I think usually in X-Men, the 90s X-Men, you saw Friends of Humanities just as basically biker dudes. And so the fact that they had a bigot Karen that they sent after the Morlocks in this episode was pretty funny, I thought.
Yeah, the bigot Karen was a nice addition. It's not just men, guys. It's not just guys. It's just men who are Friends of Humanity. There are women out there, too. They're your Marjorie Taylor Greens.
Indeed. And then we actually have Magneto making a good point about why Xavier and the X-Men have never done anything for the Morlocks, and he sends them to Genosha. I thought that was a nice movement. And we do have clarity about the status of Genosha, which we didn't really have. I wasn't sure if we had clarity coming into it in the preview episode. Maybe I just should have rewatched the last episode of the show, but in this version, Genosha is no longer an allegory for apartheid South Africa. It's a mutant state. It's a mutant island. And one of the big conditions later in the episode is Magneto wants the UN to process Genosha for membership.
Well, Bob, didn't Storm offer to let the Morlocks join the X-Men?
What episode was that? Do you remember?
It was the first season, the Morlock battle at the end of it. She says, hey, Morlocks, come join us in the mansion, and they won't come with them.
Yeah.
They'd rather hang out in the sewer where they can hide.
Yeah, but surely I can see why the Morlocks may not want to be above ground in America. But surely there are other options that the X-Men could have explored in the 5 years between that and X-Men 97.
They had other stuff to do, Bob. They had the whole Phoenix saga to deal with. Morlocks were Morlocks were always in the back of their mind. And wasn't there a Christmas episode with the Morlocks too? We're going to cover.
There
that
is
later.
a Christmas episode with the Morlocks. Yeah.
The Morlocks were always on their mind, guys. They were working on it. Just taking a little while. Magneto needs to chill.
Yeah. So we also have early in the episode a point where Cyclops really wants Jean to scan Magneto. And on the one hand, Gene makes a good point that, well, it would just be a scan of his intentions at this moment. He might be lying to himself, or he might change his mind in the future, which that actually is a good point. But then she was just ethically unwilling to do it, which seemed to me to be a really silly distinction that doesn't really fit in with how X-Men comics and the prior shows treated telepathy.
Yeah, this is the single tiny plot point that slightly annoyed me in this episode. It was tiny. There's no reason Gene would not go up in his mind. Because, I mean, he's not wearing the damn helmet. Just do it.
Xavier and Jean and Psylocke have never been shy about, or Emma Frost have never been shy about using telepathy.
Especially when it's Magneto. Yeah. I mean, come on.
Although I did like the point that Magneto had the helmet as much to save him from his emotional bond with Charles rather than just to protect himself from psychic attacks.
Yeah. There's apparently some issue going around. There's something going around online about one of the first episodes of X-Men 92. Professor X is able to use his mind powers on Magneto even though Magneto's wearing the helmet. But then they made it a point in this episode to point out that he's without the helmet, you could read his mind. And it was...
Well, apparently, this is at least a story I've heard. I'm suspicious of this, but the story I've heard is that the idea that the helmet was a telepathic block was first thought of in the first X-Men movie.
Right.
So that might explain that discrepancy. Is that,
yep.
Yeah, no.
That's the thing, and that's what a lot of people said in response, but then somebody made a point that, like, it's been around since, like, 87. So, I don't know. It would take some digging. I don't know. But I'm just saying, there is that piece, and then some were like, well, maybe it has to do with range. If in the scene I'm talking about, Professor X is right up in Magneto's face, whereas it's like you can't read my mind from miles away.
Yeah.
With the helmet on.
No, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Another thing with Magneto we're getting this episode is we're going into the Rogue Gambit Magneto triangle, which I'll be honest is actually one of my favorite romantic triangles in the X-Men. So I'm excited to see what they do with it.
All right, Bob. So I'm just going to ask you the question: why is it that Magneto can touch Rogue in this case?
I believe the explanation is usually that he can use his magnetism to suspend her power, basically.
Okay, that's someone stated, and this was the best, that in Age of Apocalypse, she had absorbed so much of Polaris's powers that her power and Magneto's powers canceled each other out.
Oh, interesting.
No, but I do not remember if she ever touched Polaris in that episode Polaris showed up in.
I should go back and reread this stuff because it's good stuff. I just haven't read it in some years.
Yeah.
But the two occasions besides Age of Apocalypse where they do Rogue and Magneto romantic stuff that I know off the top of my head is there's some stuff with Rogue, Magneto, and the Savage Land in the late 80s around the Outback era. And then there's stuff in the X-Men Legacy comic in the mid-2000s. And I'm almost positive that the stuff about Magneto being able to cancel out her powers is in that X-Men Legacy comic, although, again, it's been a few years. And then I think it may be in the 80s stuff, too, but I didn't check.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's just an interesting piece here, and I know a lot of people are bitching about it online, but it's going to lead to something cool. I know it.
Oh, man, that's hilarious. We're
going to enjoy it. Well, I think it's more they like Gambit and Rogue together.
That I get.
Not Magneto and Rogue, and that's the problem. I think that's the issue, but still at the same time, I think they have something good going on here. This is not just because we can thing. This is going to lead to something further down the road that's going to be way interesting.
If people like Gambit and Rogue, that's totally fair. But if people are carping about, why can Magneto cancel out Rogue's powers? That's dumb.
Yeah, and they shouldn't be.
Well, and I will say, I say this from a place of deep, deep love for Rogue and Gambit. They're my favorite X-Men couple, but I also do like them having a rival. It makes it more interesting. And also, like, the Magneto-Rogue relationship is older than the Rogue-Gambit relationship. The Rogue-Gambit relationship is a very late 80s, early 90s thing. The Magneto-Rogue relationship is from the slightly not as late 80s.
Right. And see, my only memory of Magneto and Rogue is Age of Apocalypse. So, I mean, that's that was stuck in my
Yeah,
mind.
they weren't
Especially from
doing
this
that.
time.
They weren't doing that when we were reading it, but in the late '80s and in the mid-aughts,
Yeah.
it was a big deal. Yeah, and then they did it in the Age of Apocalypse. Yeah, I will say on the subject of a lot of people are saying best Cyclops ever. You're pointing out, man, Cyclops is really the douche, and I thought in this episode it was pretty hilarious. The last episode. Scotty was all, Cyclops was all, ooh, I don't listen to the government. Government oppresses mutant rights. And in this episode, Cyclops is, oh, we got to listen to the government. We got to give Magneto over to government. Government's here to defend us.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. Scotty is not a very consistent person.
No. It's almost, he thinks he's rational, but he's wholly driven by his emotions. Interesting.
What a crazy template for a character.
Yeah, no, not at all relatable to any character archetype that's very prevalent in modern times. Not at all.
Not at all.
Oh, man. Wolverine enjoying Scott and Jean having discord is deeply amusing, though. Did you like the Executioner design?
Well, Bob, I purchased the action figure. The most bigoted thing about it is the Friends of Humanity belt buckle. I don't know if you caught that in the show, but he has an FOH for a belt buckle.
I did not catch that.
And it's like gold.
It's a shame that we have to associate big belt buckles with bigotry. Matt, are you a fan of the fact that Wolverine made Scott a convertible, but now Jean has made Wolverine a convertible?
A really nice Easter egg, Bob. Awesome Easter egg. If you had to have watched the show and remembered that scene to even get an idea of what was going on. But yeah.
I also did think, and I saw people incorrectly complaining about this, that Rogue's powers don't work on humans. Yes, they do. They always have done. How do you think she got her powers from Miss Marvel? Like, Miss Marvel is not a mutant, but using Rogue to steal the knowledge from the Doctor and then help deliver Jean's baby, I thought was an inspired bit of business. I
thought it was pretty cool. It was a good way to utilize Rogue's powers and let people know that she does have these powers, that she has that ability. Because it's not something we saw a lot of in the original. And I can see why people are confused, because you didn't see a lot of it in X-Men 92. But at the same time, yeah, she should be able to do that. That's part of her power. She zaps memory, she zaps knowledge, she zaps all kinds of stuff from them.
Another really sick moment in this episode is Magneto just ripping out all the chairs and railings in the United Nations and then turning them into bars. That was really cool.
I got slightly uncomfortable during this whole scene because Magneto's speech and everything involved with him just taking everybody, all the members of the court, everything, throwing them into space, going up. It was brilliant. And we'll get to that in a second, more about the January 6 parallels. But I wish we'd had a Magneto. Like, where's our Magneto?
Oh man, we do see Executioner setting up to take out Magneto JFK style, but then Storm throwing herself in front of the blast and getting depowered. And I really felt I should have called that's what the gun was for.
You did call it though, Bob. You did call it. I'm going to give you credit because you told me about the Forge story. And then when I saw the gun, okay, the toy had the gun, so I was like, this gun is special for some reason. And then, and I didn't bring that up in the episode because I didn't want to spoil anything for you. But you mentioned the gun from Forge and how Storm lost her power. So now it all makes sense now, and that's going to tie in with those episode titles as well. It makes sense.
Yeah. So the preview episode, if listeners didn't listen to it, we talked about the fact that 2 episodes are named after Life Death, which is a famous story, at least one of which deals with Storm being depowered. And I didn't think it would be like something they would do in the premiere, right? So I did think that there was some possibility they would depower Storm, although I think I was also a little skeptical that they would, because we were talking about the first Life Death episode is half a Mojo and Jubilee episode and half a Life Death episode. So it's like, A, she's depowered before that episode, and B, they're not going to be able to do all that in 15 minutes, right?
Right.
So I wasn't I thought they would do Storm spotlights, but I wasn't sure it would be depowered Storm. But yeah, indeed it is depowered Storm.
Yeah. Which is interesting. I mean, I'm hoping she gets her powers back before the end, because the stuff she did in the first episode was amazing, and I just want more of it. And the voice actors too. God, the voice actors are so good. Sounds exactly the same as 92.
It was very good. Although I also wonder if that's one of the things that encouraged them to go the depowered route is they played her up as so powerful in the first 2 episodes, right?
Right, that could be it. Because she is, I mean, by the time, if you look at the whole cast of X-Men you have here, I mean, you have a lot of powerful characters that there's only, you're going to have to really be creative with your problems because there's so many easy ways that can be fixed and solved, which is sort of an issue with the X-Men in general if you have so many different power sets to pull from.
Although in a sense they're all, except for Storm, they all still are much less powerful than the Justice League, at least.
That's true. That is very true.
But yeah, no, it's a common problem in this sort of storytelling, for sure. So Matt, we already teased this, but how annoyed do you think Trump voters are about the January 6th parallels to this?
I mean, I hope they are, but I doubt they're watching X-Men, so whatever.
I don't know. I was seeing a lot of complaining before the show premiered from anti-woke people and from Trump people, but I haven't seen a lot since the show premiered, which is interesting.
Maybe those people just don't really exist.
Yeah, it's almost like they're sock puppets.
They're just trying to get people riled up for no reason.
So
Woke and X-Men, what?
What? How could this be woke? It's not been woke since at least 1976, if not 1963. So, Matt, what do you think of the Madeline Pryor cliffhanger?
Oh man, so do we think this is going to be the real Jean at the front door, or is the real Jean the pregnant one who's going to have the baby Nathaniel? I'm sorry, well, she's already had the baby. Is she going to have the baby Nathaniel?
I tend to think it would be the real Jean because I think that would produce the more interesting storytelling, right?
So you're thinking the person at the front door is the real Jean. The person who had the baby is Madeline Pryor.
That's what I'm thinking.
Okay, now help me understand this, Bob, in the comic books. Because Madeline Pryor, does she have telepathic powers?
Initially, no. Yeah, I don't think... Man, it's been some years, but... Yeah, she doesn't have mutant powers when she hooks up with Cyclops, but then eventually she cuts a deal with demons for Inferno and becomes Goblin Queen. But even when she's the Goblin Queen, I don't think she has telepathy, although maybe I'm wrong about that.
That's where my confusion lies, Bob, because I don't know how they're going to spin this with her having the power set that she has and this she's already used.
I mean, the one thing, though, to remember is the storytelling around Madeline Pryor and Jean in the 80s is pretty garbled, partially because that's just the way people plotted comics then, partially because of editorial interference. So I think it makes more sense that a clone of Jean would have Jean's powers, yeah?
Yeah, that would make sense, especially if it's a Sinister... Yeah, because, I mean, Madeline Pryor is essentially a Sinister clone, right?
You believe so, yeah.
Okay, so so that does make sense, and Sinister would have the ability and the genetic coding of he's got the genetic coding of Jean Grey because he kidnapped
her and Scott in this. I think it's the season 2 premiere, right?
Yes. So he's got her DNA. Awesome.
So the real question: will Madeline Pryor have a bit in the opening credits for episode 3?
Possibly. Did you like how
That's
the
funny.
X-Men baby blanket had X's on it, Bob?
That was cute. I assume that's branded and they have that out as merchandise for all the
I wish they
millennials.
did because I would get one to put around my niece. It'd be really cool. No one else in the family would understand it. But
Yeah. I thought you were going to get it to put around your cat, but yeah, your niece is also acceptable.
That's even funnier. Yeah, I might do that instead. Yeah. So Disney, if you are listening, another thing I will buy from you is a baby blanket with X's on it. So get that done. Although, did you have a QR code pop up at some point or before the episode that said you could get official merchandise? It was on the Disney Plus thing. I clicked it to see what it was. It was such a garbage. It was mugs and stuff.
Maybe, but if it did, I didn't pay any attention.
Oh yeah, and you couldn't have scanned it anyway. But it's fine. Yeah,
Exactly.
I don't know what I'm asking. All right, so yeah.
So who was your favorite character for Mutant Liberation Begins?
God, Bob, Magneto. Magneto is awesome. This
Yeah.
is Magneto's episode. This episode is awesome. Even Magneto's stupid costume, I'm fine. Well, I say stupid, but actually I don't really mind it as much now that I've seen it in action and movement.
The amount of people thirsting over Magneto on the internet has been pretty funny with like the bare arms and this costume.
I mean, it's not I'm not thirsting, but I don't have an issue with the design. It's just not. But some people would. This is what I feel like Magneto, if he was on the X-Men, what he would wear. Whereas when he's a Brotherhood of Mutants, he wears the other outfit, the red one with the helmet. Yeah.
Well, you do get a lot of great Magneto lines in this. He was my favorite character too. So he has the great pun to the UN judges of "Don't make me let you down,"
Yeah.
which is a very, very clever pun. And then I think maybe even more than that, I like when the Friends of Humanity are first breaking into the UN. He tells the UN judges to play by the rules, and still they come for you.
Yeah, because of that whole scene, Bob, with the UN, I'm giving that it's my favorite episode of the two. I love the first episode. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the first episode. Oh no, it's amazing. I'm going to rewatch it for sure, like probably today. But the second episode, I think, really moves it into new territory that we haven't seen before.
That's fair. That's fair. I was a little torn because I think the writing and the plotting is better in the second, but I thought the fights were better in the first. Mm-hmm. But I think I would have to say the second too.
Yeah. All right, Bob. So let's move on to something a little different.
Yeah. So I mean, this is a long tradition of TV revivals, and so we tried to put together a ranked list of TV revivals. And so by revivals, we don't mean reboots of shows, right?
Correct.
But we mean continuations of at least a few years, and in some cases 30 years. So we both put together a ranked list of revivals of old shows. Most of these are new seasons. Sometimes there are a couple seasons. A couple I went with are just movies. But Matt, did you want to run down your ranked list of revivals so far?
Sure, Bob. So, like Bob said, revivals are not reboots. Revivals are they bring back the same characters. And they're usually older. That's the whole point.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
Twin Peaks: The Return is the best revival I've ever seen, and I'll probably never forget it, and just probably rewatch it annually probably for the rest of my life. All right, X-Men '97. I'm putting next to this. I know we haven't watched the whole season, but Bob, this thing is awesome. It's been better than any of the other revivals I've seen. Just looking at the first two episodes. After X-Men '97, I'm going to go with Young Justice. I haven't seen everything in Young Justice yet. So
You've only seen about 10 episodes of season 3, right? And so with Young Justice, we have season 3 and season 4 as the revival.
And from what you've told me about season 4, I may be pushing it further down. I don't know for sure. But of the other revivals, it's still going to be further up there.
Well, in one way, I'm afraid you won't like Young Justice season 4. But in other ways, I think Young Justice season 4 is better than season 3.
Okay. But
I might even rank the seasons 2, 4, 1, 3.
But the shows...
Yeah,
the shows after...
And sorry, if people are interested in more of that, they can check us out on Patreon. Where
we cover all kinds of stuff. Yeah. So the revivals that are after Young Justice on my list are not... I'm not saying they're that great, but they're just high up on the list because there aren't that many revivals out there. So just because it's in the middle of the list doesn't mean it's going to be a good thing. So my next... I had trouble.
Well, I would actually, to counter you, I would say there's a lot of revivals out there. I would just say you and I have limited appetites for them, though.
That's probably what it is. But this is the next one, and this is one I've told you 100 times. I did not like this that much, but I'm saying Dexter New Blood. It's like the most mediocre thing ever. They just felt they had to do it. It didn't have much more to it than that. So I don't think you've watched it, have you?
No, I never got past season 4 of Dexter. I heard the guest stars for season 5, and that doesn't sound good. I don't need to watch that.
Just end it with that. You're actually in a very good position, because if you just stop at season 4 and end it with with what happened at the end of season 4, you are good. Everything after that's crap. So next we have Arrested Development. I watched the show, the original series. I loved it. It was hilarious. It's one of the most. But once again, this revival to me just is like, why? Why are we having this?
Did you watch both seasons of the revival or just season 4?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Picard, Bob, comes next, only for season 3. Picard season 1 and 2 are a whole different thing. It's weird. Okay, Bob, here's one that you didn't have on your list, Saved by the Bell.
Somehow I never got to the Saved by the Bell.
It wasn't that bad. I'm going to admit. I'm still low on this list.
If it wasn't that bad, shouldn't it be better than the Dexter?
It's still low on this list. And I still wasn't good enough for me to watch the second season of it.
Oh, okay.
So that tells you
Fair
something.
point.
But I'm just saying, if you like Saved by the Bell and you want more of it,
Is the premise that they're all teachers?
one of them's like the one from Showgirls is a counselor. The one Elizabeth Berkley or whatever her name is. Zach is like a senator in California. Slater's the PE teacher. That was given. I think Screech wasn't on it, but then Screech died, so it was like they couldn't do that. All right.
How could you do it without Screech?
Yeah, you could. They have their children on the show. Yeah, a lot of these are like their children. The next one on the list, which is the Connors, which was just basically Darlene's kids and Dan. They tried to do Roseanne and she got fired. It would have been a better show had Roseanne been.
Oh, so they turned Roseanne into the Connors.
Yeah, Roseanne was gonna have a comeback. And
no,
then,
it had one, right? Like they were like in the first or second season.
Yeah, and then Roseanne quote unquote died off screen, and then they continued.
Was John Goodman still in it?
Yeah, John Goodman was still in it. It was basically his show, and then they brought in the woman who played Peggy Bundy on Married with Children, and also was she's been in so many shows. She's been in Sons of Anarchy.
I don't know her. Oh, yeah.
Her name is escaped. Katie Seagal. Quantum Leap Bob is at the very bottom of this list. God, Quantum Leap pissed me off so bad.
You felt a personal betrayal on this one, it seems
because
like.
it was sold as a revival, but it's really a reboot. So that's why it's going at the bottom of the I'm not going to curse, at the bottom of the list.
Fair. Yeah.
All
right. I knew you weren't a huge fan of it, but man, I'm really picking up some bitterness on the Quantum Leap revival.
Yeah.
For me, I've seen slightly different shows than Matt. I haven't seen the Roseanne revival or the Connors. I haven't seen the Frasier revival. I thought you'd said you had seen the Heroes revival, Matt.
I had not. No, I think I watched the
okay.
the originals, but I didn't watch I didn't watch that. No.
I never watched any of it. Okay,
Oh.
so those are a few others I found when I was looking around for revival shows. But for me, I would go Twin Peaks: The Return, #1 with a bullet. Then I would say Deadwood, the movie, was actually really great. I didn't think it was actually necessary, but I'm glad they did it, especially since I believe a couple of the cast members died a little after it, like with Twin Peaks. And then the writer, David Milch, I think got Alzheimer's and isn't writing anything else. So it was nice that this was his last TV work. I appreciated that. So I have an argument for putting X-Men 97 over Young Justice. At this moment, I still think I collectively enjoy Young Justice Season 3 and Season 4 more than these two episodes of X-Men 97, although that's also a weird comparison, right? Because it's two complete seasons versus 2 episodes of TV. But I will say the Young Justice revival was trying to revive a show that got prematurely canceled after its best season. Season 2 is its best season. It gets canceled at the peak. And as good as I think Season 3 and 4 are, they're not as good as Season 2. Does that make sense?
That does make sense.
Whereas I have to say that even though I like Season 3 and 4 better than these 2 episodes of X-Men 97, these 2 episodes of X-Men 97 are arguably better than X-Men 92 ever was.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But that's a sign. That's just the time.
A lot of that is just modern sensibilities. And also the fact that they put a lot more budget and a lot more craft and a lot more talent into it, I'm sure.
A lot less censoring as well.
That's a great point, too. A lot less censoring. So because X-Men 97, at least to this point, is such a dramatic improvement over what came before, I would put X-Men 97, then Young Justice Season 3 and 4. Then I would put Clone Wars Season 7, which I think was 5 years after Clone Wars was canceled. Clone Wars Season 7, to me, I'm not a huge Clone Wars guy, but to me it was just more of the same. So it's a perfectly adequate revival in that sense, I suppose. I have only seen Arrested Development Season 4. I haven't seen Season 5, and I watched Arrested Development Season 4 with a bunch of friends the day it came out. We just watched all of it.
Yeah.
So it didn't stick in my memory very well. I remember thinking that it wasn't terrible, and I did appreciate that it was so experimental. It's one of the few shows that actually does seem to experiment with being on streaming and with doing new stuff. So I have somewhat fond memories of it, but they're vague, and I haven't rewatched it since it premiered, and I certainly haven't watched Season 5, so I'm limited in my ability to speak about it. After that, I would go with the prequel Sopranos movie, which they did in lieu of a revival because unfortunately James Gandolfini died. That's not a very good movie, unfortunately. And then the worst to me, I found Picard season 3 insanely pandering, insanely dumb, insanely disrespectful. It makes me so angry to think about. Yeah, so screw you, Picard season 3.
Bob, really, it wasn't that bad.
Yes,
All right.
it was.
Awful.
They flew the Enterprise D into the Borg Death Star, Matt. They flew it into the Borg Death Star.
All right, Bob. So let's move on to something a little more humorous here. Let's talk
right,
about these
so-
comments you found.
I was trying to find some stupid comments on Facebook and Twitter, and the day of, I didn't find anything. Eventually, I found some stuff, but mostly it wasn't mean-spirited or dumb. It was just people with incorrect well actuallys. And so we get to well actually. The first one, I'm almost 100% sure I'm right on this, but I want you to double check me. So a lot of people just saw the Archangel episode in the first season of X-Men 92, right?
Right.
And so a lot of people were like, why is Archangel or why is Angel in the picture? Because he wasn't in the original 5. And I'm 100% sure when we see flashbacks of the original 5 in X-Men 92, we see Angel with them, right?
Yes, Bob. He's flying through a hoop.
That's
And
right. Yeah.
And he's in his stupid costume that we all hate, that red suspender outfit with the yellow and dumb looking. Yeah. So,
we talked about that.
They don't know.
Yeah, which, again, it's not the worst thing in the world, but it's just funny. The original show was inconsistent.
Yeah.
It did that Archangel episode that acted like the X-Men had never seen him before, but then it did show him in flashbacks multiple times as a member of the original 5.
Yeah, because continuity was not an issue back then because no one cared.
Yeah. Well, we cared, Matt, but no one cared that we cared.
Yeah, exactly. It's different. It's a different thing. Yeah, I don't even explain it. Jesus, we did care because we were annoyed. I don't know if we cared as much as children, but as adults looking back, did it annoy you that much as a child?
I don't think I felt assertive enough to have feelings of being annoyed or disliking TV when we were watching this as kids. But I do think we did notice that because we knew the Archangel episode pretty well, and we did occasionally in the Iceman episode to see Angel as a member of the original 5, and I think we did think that was strange.
Yeah, we did. But at the same time, though, I don't know. I felt with these things being in so many different media now, different mediums, you've got games, books, comics, board games, RPGs, cartoons, all the different spin-offs, everything. Like, the continuity seems it's more important now than it was back then when you just had the TV show and the comics.
Another amusing version of carping was I found someone who was really mad that the new show had written Xavier off. And it's just, my brother, they did that in the series finale of the first one. That was not these writers' choice. They were picking up on that.
And people understanding that he's supposed to be dead in the eyes of the humans. That's the point. Yeah. He was assassinated. Yeah. He's supposed to look dead, and the Shi'ar have taken him off to try to heal him. Maybe, maybe not. We don't know. That's the whole point. So when people are like, Xavier's not supposed to be dead, it's like they haven't watched the original show. Like, they don't know. They're just basing it off of 2 episodes they remember.
We'll talk about this when we get to the finale, but it's also very clear when you watch the finale, I don't know how recently you have, that the writers want to kill Xavier, but they can't.
Yeah, they're not allowed to.
Sending him to live with the Shi'ar, where explicitly Lalandra's he can never come back. That's their way of sending him to heaven.
Let me just say too that I watched the episode this week, Bob, because I wanted to.
Oh, you did.
In prep for watching this, I watched this and I watched the Mr. Sinister origin episode, which I think is
that one rocks. I can't wait to talk about that one.
That's a good episode, but. The thing about the end of that episode as well is it just ends. He gets taken off into space, and all the X-Men and Magneto are standing there staring at the ship, and then it just cuts to credits. It's in the credits, Bob, are the same damn credits you see in this episode. Well, not the same, but updated credits you see in this with the spinning X-Men and a mouse pointer going and clicking each one and showing their powers are. That was another piece of nostalgia. Bob, here's what I'd like you to do. I've found a meme this morning. I want you to look at it, and I want you to just describe it to the audience.
God, do I have to?
Come on, Bob. You can do it.
Oh, God. It has the two versions of Rogue flying from the X-Men 97 credits and the X-Men 92 credits. The X-Men 92 credits is on top. Obviously, in the X-Men 92 version, because Rogue's butt was a big deal for that show, it's in a lot of frames. She's flying at a weird angle where probably not how somebody would actually fly. And you can see a very prominent butt and also comedically large breast in the X-Men 92 animation. In the X-Men 97 animation, Rogue is at a more normal posture. She's not, for some mysterious reason, rolling her butt to the camera. And she's still a very attractive lady. She still has a very ample bosom and butt, but it's not as comedically ballooned out as it is in the X-Men 92. And so someone who needs to be in an institution, like this person like needs to be put in a straitjacket and given shock therapy. That's the only way to get the person who made this meme in a better place. Their description of the X-Men 92 version of Rogue in the opening credits is, quote, Rogue looks to be at least 21 to 25. Part of her character is basically being a sex symbol. She's the super hot Southern chick that you can never kiss. And then
Bob, how is hot spelled?
It's spelled Hawt, which, yeah. And then in this animated depiction of just a normally proportioned woman who's still very on the ample side, this sicko, this absolute freak, has written, quote, looks like she's like 15 to 16, definitely looks underage. And, oh my God, the internet was a mistake, Matt. We should shut it down.
Bob, what does it have at the bottom? It's a picture. Is that Timon from Lion King?
Yeah. So this freak has talked himself into believing that everybody who doesn't share his exact same sexual preferences for women is some sort of pedophile. When in reality, the guy who made this meme is probably the pedophile. And even if he's not, needs to be in an institution strapped down like a Tom Waits in Bram Stoker's Dracula style with the long sleeves on the straitjacket that he flaps around, and then regularly getting electroshocks and regularly getting his blood drawn by Dracula. That's my opinion of the man who made this meme.
Yeah, I don't even remember where I found this, Bob, but this is like the worst one I've seen so far. Like, this is one of the worst ones I've ever seen.
Well, and there's just this whole sick discourse about Rogue's butt in the internet where people are complaining because she doesn't have, in the new version, she doesn't have this comically scaled up butt, and it's so sick and weird.
Yeah, it's really weird.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Well, that was the worst meme I could find, Bob, out of all the
Thank
memes.
you, Matt.
Yeah, you're welcome, Bob. I'm glad, and you described it very well. Thank you for describing the creativity behind this piece. Appreciate it.
Yeah, my God. I'm looking at Wholesome Gambit. I'm looking at Cutoff T-shirt Gambit, and I'm healing.
Yeah.
I'm less disgusted with how weird some, and I shouldn't even say human sexuality. I would just say some really sick straight guys really need to do some self-examination.
Yeah, and get off the X-Men pages, please.
There's porn on the internet. You don't have to beat off to a cartoon character aimed at children.
Yeah, and we laugh and make fun, but guys, seriously, just give it a break.
Yeah. All right. So this has been X-Men 92. This has been our coverage of X-Men 97, the revival of X-Men 92. We are Uncanny Treks. Please join us on Patreon if you want to hear our conversations about the original show, and we put it up against the very great DC animated show, Young Justice. We think it's a good time. So join us at Patreon, Uncanny Treks, for that. Keep a lookout on the free feed. We'll do more X-Men 97 episodes. We'll also keep our coverage going of the Future Foundation. And then once that's wrapped up, we'll probably take a little break and look at some other comics. So we'll hope you'll join us for the rest of X-Men 97 Season 1 and for our comics episodes. We are Uncanny Treks. I am Bob in Cascadia. That is Matt in the Southland. Have a great night, everybody.
Thanks for listening.